everyone. This is Robert Frere. Just another message here as we're getting started. This is a full-featured webinar software here, so that we have a Q&A place where you can submit questions there, and we're also going to have time set aside for you to ask any questions, and we'll try to answer them here. We've got a great group of panelists here. In addition to myself, we've got Talis and Joao, both are experts in Alteryx and other database connectivity. And Talis is even one of the Alteryx aces we have on staff here. So we are going to be focusing a lot on the movement of lava storm to Alteryx, as well as snowflake connections, but we're also going to be dealing with the topic in a broader sense. Be able to talk a little bit about strategic planning and that type of thing for the inevitable time when the software that we rely on gets sunsetted, and how are we going to deal with keeping our businesses up to date and making those transitions without losing a lot in the interim in that time frame. So I'm going to just give us another maybe 15 seconds here, and we will get started. Hope that you all can see the screen all right. Certainly let us know if I've got the PowerPoint up here, Migration Legacy ETL to Alteryx platform. All right, and we will go ahead, and if there's no objections here, we will get started. All right, so just to give you a little idea of where we're going to be going today, I won't read each of these, but we're going to be, again, looking a little bit at what kind of a strategic approach is best for this type of project. We're going to take a deep dive. Talis is going to lead us through a deep dive into Lava Storm, some of its strengths, weaknesses, and some of the challenges that we had in converting from Lava Storm to Alteryx. Also, then we're going to get into the Snowflake Alteryx connections. There were some really important lessons that we learned in building those connections. And Snowflake, of course, is being a cloud-based solution for databases is really something that is helpful in these types of migrations. And then we're gonna talk about some success considerations, as well as a couple of other technologies that we have undergone projects to help companies move from one technology to another, whether it was through obsolescence of the application, or in sometimes the companies are just changing direction, changing focus. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the strategic approach. Now, one of the things that we want to touch on here is that all companies that are of any size at all, we're going to be using a lot of different applications. Everything from your Word and Excel to HR applications, data analytics, reporting tools, and things of that nature. So one of the things that I think is we want to stress here up front is that this is something that each enterprise should be considering in a mid to long-term view, to look at what technologies are they relying on, what's the shelf life or the expected future of each of these applications, as well as things such as sometimes the application you're using is absolutely fine, but when you look to the future, you may see, let's say, things like cloud databases or cloud architecture. You may be wanting to make sure your enterprise is taking advantage of some of those technologies. So you want to have a strategic approach, not just grab something off the shelf, but to try to put that together. So some of the categories I've shown here have to do with the hardware. You want to look at your hardware. How is that handling? Because we know that things keep doubling, the speeds keep doubling every few years. Software, and we mentioned that already. And then the services, cloud services, other types of things, because sometimes our third-party services companies go out of business or companies change their focus, and you want to be able to keep things in line there. So having a strategic analysis that is written and comprehensive is something that is very valuable for each enterprise. Again, whether you're a small to mid-sized company or a larger company, you want to have something that is in writing, something mark that you can shoot for. One of the things I used to like to say is, if it's okay to have to adjust and maybe change the mark, as long as you have a mark that you're shooting for in the first place. But if you have no mark, then you don't know whether you're on track or not. And of course, this being us being data meaning, we have done this for several customers, and we have some very experienced people on staff here. So that's something to look into as we continue on. All right. So what is when we're talking about sunsetting applications, what are we talking about? So in sunsetting, we talk is a reality that companies will often stop supporting products after a certain amount of time, or again, maybe it's a strategic shift in their approach, or people get acquired by other companies. And so there's always different reasons why a particular application that you're relying on can be sunset. So by sunsetting, we're saying that when a company chooses to no longer support an application, and the support, licensing, things of that nature are going to be going away, those are the types of things that need to be transitioned into a new application. So of course, it's not just, you can't just take one software package, take it away and bring in another one, because a lot of company knowledge, your development teams, skill sets, and their ability to use the tools, these are all things that are in question. And so as you are considering what applications to move to, you want to make sure that the applications you're moving to have a long shelf life, as well as are able for your teams to gain the training they need, the experience they need to be able to maintain your critical applications, even with the new software that's coming through. So it's one of those things that can be very unsettling for a company. But if you have a plan, as these things get identified, the sooner you can make a plan and create a project to accomplish this, the more leeway you're going to have to deal with perhaps unforeseen circumstances. All right. And specifically now we're going to look a little bit at LavaStorm. I've got a couple of things, and then I'm going to let you listen to Talis as he goes into more detail on LavaStorm. All right, so just a quick summary at a real high level. Again, Talis will get into more details. LavaStorm is an ETL, a tool-based ETL process development platform. So the idea of taking data from different sources, manipulating that data and reporting on that data, or updating databases, flat files, and things of that nature. It was a pretty well-functioning application, a lot of flexibility in that. But that flexibility, as you'll see in a minute, has got good parts to it and bad parts. And now I'll leave that for Talis to talk more about. And also, the within LavaStorm, there was a ability to use a lot of proprietary files. They had what they called BRD files that were able to be read and written from LavaStorm, but not as well to be able to read those things from something like Excel or a database or other things like that. So that's something else that we had to deal with as we were entering into this project of moving from LavaStorm to an Alteryx solution. All right, so this is a general, again, high level architecture. Just to point out a couple of things as we're looking at this. One of them is that in the original environment, as we came on board to work with the development team, there was a production sales force being used, right? So every day salespeople are putting in more information and tracking the sales and everything else that was going on. And what was happening is that data was being pulled directly from the production sales force into LavaStorm. LavaStorm's workflows or graphs were being created. And then to support historical analysis, BRD files, flat files were also being read in. And something that occurred that was apparent to me as we were going through this is that those flat files were pretty efficient when you were talking about 3 months or 4 months or 5 months of data. But as they started to get into 2 years, 3 years plus, those files became very large and unwieldy and added a lot of time to analysis. And also Salesforce itself, if you had a production Salesforce instance, it was being affected negatively by those reporting data pools. And so given that as the current environment, we proposed the following environment, which included, and this enterprise was already starting to look at Snowflake to move things over. But Snowflake being able to pull on a scheduled basis data into Snowflake so that historical data could be found from Snowflake without affecting the performance of the production Salesforce was one great advantage. Also using Alteryx with its modern connections, integration with Snowflake, Tableau, Excel, etc., were also very valuable, so that the solution that the company received from here has a lot of time available in it. The Alteryx is a growing company. Snowflake is a growing company, and of course, Excel, Tableau are all best of breed type applications. These gave the company the ability to continue to use and report and continue to grow as an enterprise with having stable applications to use throughout. All right. Now, this next part is I'm going to, Talis is going to be doing the talking here. And so we want to give you a little bit more insight into some of the development and other features in LavaStorm. All right, take it away, Talis.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Yeah, hi everyone. Like Robert said, just a quick introduction here. I'm Talis Donizetti. I'm part of the enablement team here at Data Meaning, and have been helping out some customers with Alteryx and data analytics in general. And I'm glad to be here to be talking about one out of many projects that we've been working on, specifically with this migration we handled from LavaStorm to Alteryx. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about the differences between those two platforms and how some data processes were handled and how we handled some specific topics around that migration. So just to start, I'm going to first start talking a little bit about LavaStorm and let's say current state, right, before future state with Alteryx. And I'm going to talk about you know, how we actually took care of some issues and some challenges we had with both platforms when we were dealing with the business logic and the final outcome that we were looking for. So as we're starting here, this is a LavaStorm graph, right? This is the looks of a LavaStorm graph, and actually this structure I would call as a master graph, because what you can do in LavaStorm is that you can basically pack graphs inside what we call composites. So basically, as you can see in this drawing here, this little structure with the 3 blocks, it's a composite, and inside, if you click on it and you go inside of it, you're gonna see another graph, which is kind of like that canvas with space for you to insert nodes or tools in LavaStorm that can perform data operations. So basically, you can you use that structure of composite to basically enable or disable parts of your process, or even like if you have a big data process going on, if you want to actually pack that so you can look a little bit better once you link other parts of that process, you put that into a composite. So that's the whole idea of having a composite in LavaStorm and having things being packed or nodes or data being packed inside of those composites. You can go ahead, Robert. So inside, like for example, inside of one of those composites, you can see that structure, which is actually what we want to do, right? We want to use those nodes to perform any data transformation, data integration within that platform. So you can see like this, each node has a specific purpose. So you can see there's a filter node, which is actually not meant to be a filter if you think about it, because you can write expressions and perform calculations inside of it. But you have all those kinds of nodes that you can actually see. This xref node, which is a join. It has the structure of a join. The change metadata node, which basically will allow you to change the data types of your columns, and all of those nodes together, of course, will make your process meaningful, right? And the thing about those nodes is each of these nodes, besides the configuration steps that you have to actually set up inside the node, you also have a place where you can put expressions. So that's where I think it gets a little bit confusing, because if you're allowed to place expressions with those specific nodes. No, Robert, just let me finish the real quick. Yeah. So if you let those nodes have expressions with apart from having those configurations specific to that node, you kind of mix everything into a single bowl, right? So that is for me, that is where I think things can get a little bit confusing. But another thing that you can actually see is whenever you're running those nodes, you can click on the output of each node and see the preview data, which will always have 1,000 rows by default. And you can actually also see how data is flowing through your graph. Okay, so now you can go ahead, Robert. So as I was saying, for those expressions, this is how it looks like, the script that you have to write inside of those expressions. So as you can see, if you zoom in a little bit, Robert, you can see that at some point this can get a little bit confusing because it mixes a lot of data operations, right? So it basically it can allow you to write expressions related to definitely like different kinds of data operations that can be mixed together in a script. So at some point, if you let this happen, your script can get a little bit big in size, right? And that's where the problems can come in. Problems related to even keeping track of what's being done inside that node or inside that script. If you have any data changes or any data problems that you're seeing in an output, it's hard to track where this problem is coming from, because you have this whole script where a lot of things are being done at the same time in that script. So that's where I think it's it allows you to be flexible, like Robert said, but at the same time, it also that flexibility can make you feel those pain points related to maintenance, especially, and keep track of what's being done, that data lineage and that kind of thing. I think it gets harmed throughout the process. So you can zoom out a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Besides that, for those expressions, you also have the possibility to set parameters for a specific graph. So those parameters are basically, they can be referenced inside the nodes. So if you change value in one of those parameters, if you're referencing that parameter, which we could call a variable or something like that, right? This value will change according to that parameter list that you have for that graph. Of course, the way that those parameters are referenced may also happen to be a little bit confusing in some kind of point. Because all of the structure is defined around those parameters themselves. So, but it's also something that you can leverage inside the platform. So you can go ahead, Robert, one more slide. Yeah. So we can see that apart from all of that I mentioned, there are also some challenges related to the implementation of the platform itself, right? As an enterprise platform. The first thing I noticed, especially in the environment that I was working on, is that the file server was all on Linux. So when we're talking about that, you have to use FTP servers, for example, to transfer files around. And like Robert was mentioning, when you have those flat files that are huge in size, and you need to maybe use one of those files in another tool or integrate that with other systems, that can get a little bit hard to transfer around, right? So I think this definitely was a big challenge. Not saying that being on Linux is bad, right? But when your architecture mixes that kind of thing with a file structure and everything, things can get more complicated. And it's definitely good to see if it's worth having such a big platform like that in a different environment than other people are working on, and what kind of data are you dealing with in that environment, and how you're transferring, how you're integrating that data with other systems. Those error messages that we would see sometimes when running those graphs, or even diving into the nodes, were not really meaningful sometimes, and it would be hard to understand why this was failing, right? Why the process was not working as expected. So I found that LavaStorm would produce some really weird errors that would be hard to identify for some of the times that we would work with. And the licensing system is, I know there are different types of licensing, but at least in the environment that we were working on, licensing, that kind of licensing that we use from the server, sometimes that would work, sometimes that would not work. And again, when it didn't work, it didn't provide enough information about what's going on, if this is actually a network issue, or why is that actually failing, why am I not able to license my platform and my machine and sync that with the server. So that was a bit challenging, because development would definitely had an impact when we would experience those kind of issues. So now we're moving from LavaStorm to Alteryx, right? So how we would handle all of that I just mentioned, how LavaStorm behaves with all of those nodes and those scripts, how we will handle that into Alteryx. So we define an approach. Of course, again, this is not, you know, a solution that should be followed and blindly followed, let's say, but we try to define an approach to actually take that migration, right? So those composites were actually converted into Alteryx containers. So we could see, you know, like if people were trying to split those composites based on a business process or something like that, we would actually put them in a container and name that container with that specific process name, right? And besides that, we would also take the judgment if that composite was actually supposed to be another workflow, right? For example, if we had a process that was not even a composite that was not even linked with other composites, and it had nothing to do with the process itself. So we would convert that into other smaller workflows and handle that differently. So that was also an approach that we took because we thought that it would be more organized to deal with that way. And other things like processes that were sending emails or even triggering applications to handle file transfers and things like that. Those processes would also sometimes be turned into workflow events. Basically in Alteryx, you can set an event for that workflow depending on a condition, if that workflow runs with errors or runs without errors, and things like that. So you can actually set that in a cleaner way, let's say, than putting all that logic into LavaStorm like it was being done before. And the last point is we also try to use colored containers to split up the kinds of process that we were doing. So for example, as you can see, the green container here, that's an input. That's considered an input because we had multiple snowflake connections on that part, right? So we handle all that pre-processing that was happening in workflow as an input because we're not actually bringing data to Alteryx before we do the data stream out and push this data to Alteryx and start actually using the Alteryx tools to work with that data. The blue container here is considered a preparation step. So filtering, performing calculations, transposing the data, aggregating the data, things like that would be considered preparation steps. On the other hand, if we see joins, join tools, union tools, the pen fill tools, all of those tools that are related to data blending in general, they would be colored purple. So you can see like, okay, if I'm seeing that the data is being duplicated at some point on my process, that could be because of a join, right? So I can actually visually look at that container and identify that, okay, the problem might be here in this purple container area where I actually blended that data source with another data source or with that part of the data flow with another one. So I think that was for the purposes of tracking our data flow was a lot better to use those visual tricks, you know, alongside with documentation, of course, that we provided inside of the workflow. Like in this example as well, we have like the orange container, which was more like related to automation steps in general, like sending emails or maybe doing some file transfer if we needed to. So that's what this would mean. Okay. can go further. Okay, yeah. Putting more context into that, right? So this process is now that there were those huge scripts, now they look cleaner and they look more user friendly, right? So you can actually use different tools. The Alteryx has tools basically for any kind of not only data preparation, but any data related process. And now you can actually see those tools or blocks as they are considered in Alteryx make more sense into your data flow. Regarding documentation, there are so many ways to document your workflow. You can use titles in those containers. Like we said, there are comment boxes that you can actually put inside those containers or even outside of the containers. You can color those comment boxes as well to maybe put a warning or color them in a strong color where you can actually catch the attention of the user. And the calculations are now done using multiple steps, not in just a single tool. So they are easier to troubleshoot. And the cool thing also that I found when dealing with both platforms, the data that can be checked in the output anchor of Alteryx, besides being easily copied over to other places, if you want to, you can actually use that clipboard functionality that you have in Alteryx in the results window. Not only that, but you can also now in the recent versions of Alteryx, you can also filter that data. You can sort that data in the results window. So you don't actually need to set up another flow or even like bring other tools into your existing flow to understand what's going on in there, because you can do all of those steps in the results window. So it's more dynamic. Definitely, it's more dynamic. It's easier to use. It's more user friendly. And when we talk about scripts, right? We were talking about those scripts being hard to read and being hard to understand. Now we have the formula tool where we can split even the column creation into multiple columns. And we can actually split those expressions in a way that it's easier to understand. So you can actually follow a logic. I'm creating column V and then I'm creating column B based on the V column that I created. And I'm doing an if here, an if else here. Then in the second column, I'm doing a different if else. So you can actually see things that you're doing and it makes a lot more sense. And even when you're developing, you're typing your code, you can see those autocomplete functions that you have, the coloring that you have for each field name or for each expression. Another thing that I really like is when you're actually creating an expression in the wrong way, you get a red underline. And if you hover over that red underline, you're going to see what you're doing wrong. So for example, if you're typing an if condition and you forgot the end if or the else, at some point it'll actually tell you that expression is not correctly parsed or something in that way. So I think now it's a lot easier even for you to manage that code. If you have to write code in Alteryx, it's a lot easier to understand. It's a lot easier to manage. It's a lot easier to test. And even the metadata, you cannot set the metadata when you're doing your expressions. It's not something like it's being done under the hood, so it's more customizable as well. And regarding the parameters that we had, right, in LavaStorm, how would we handle that? So in Alteryx, we could use the direct conversion to workflow constants, right? So if you actually click on the configuration of a workflow, you're going to see that there is that constant area where you have those standard constants that are brought every time you create a workflow. Those are the engine constants, right? And there are the user constants where basically you can actually set your own values, and these can be strings or numeric if you check that box. And they can also be referenced in other tools if you need. These are also used with the action tools as well. They can be brought into many places. And the other option was basically turn those workflows into analytic applications. So in Alteryx, you can actually define those parameters at runtime if you're using an app, right? So since we had that environment with Alteryx Designer and Alteryx Server, that was a lot easier to do because we could deploy that application to the server and tell the user, okay, I want to run that report based on that quarter now, right? So they would just set that parameter. They would not need to go inside the workflow and change the constants to actually work for that specific case that the user was looking for. So that can generate dynamic outputs, and it's a lot easier to the user. So some challenges we had with Alteryx, of course, in every migration process, you're also when you're taking something new, you're also going to see that some changes are not, very comfortable, let's say, right? So one of the challenges we saw was that some ETL processes that were were more clear, right? In LavaStorm were actually a little bit hard to set up, and they required a little bit more creativity. And syncing Designer with Server was also a little bit of a challenge when we had to change processes or link workflows together. That in Server can get a little bit more complicated. And the workload also needs to be balanced and analyzed, because workflow that takes 1 hour in your machine is one thing. Workflow that takes 1 hour in the server, that it's 1 hour of the server queue that is being consumed. So resources need to be definitely analyzed in that front. And some connectors. Alteryx has a bunch of connectors, but some of them are in development or test phase. So they will not fit all of the environments, let's say. And that's not even an Alteryx fault. It's more like systems are evolving and changing, and these connectors are based in APIs, for example, and those APIs need to be more modern once the application is changing and evolving. So it's definitely a challenge that would be common in every other platform. So the other cool thing I wanted to show is that we also created a container that it's basically a workflow, but we turned that into a container, right? Where we would connect the outputs to that container to check the metadata and actually track the source of that data. So we would store that in files, and we would have, okay, that specific output file for that workflow containing all the metadata related to it. So it was good to validate the process and basically align that with the old process in LavaStorm and see, okay, those two are actually matching, and we can say that the migration was successful. And just the last thing to wrap up, we actually also created some kind of improvement list from LavaStorm to Alteryx. So we had graph 1 and workflow 1, and we would compare what kind of things that actually got improved in this process. So we could see a lot of those things coming up, things like the InDB features that made the process a lot faster in Alteryx. The things, for example, how Alteryx would handle the order of operations. Sometimes you would have a very complex process in LavaStorm with a lot of nodes just to do a check, or maybe to actually make sure that the data is running the correct order. And then in Alteryx, we would do that in a different way, and that would be an easier solution. So things like that, it's very good when you're doing that kind of project to actually gather all those improvements. And this is also good to justify the investment, right, to your leadership and to the company, and see, okay, this change actually got me got so many things improved that was worth putting up all the time and money on it. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Talis, and you know those were a couple of months of good hard work that we did for that, and so thank you for covering those things. Just to real quick, as we were talking a little bit about the proprietary files, I won't go much into that. I think Talis covered that pretty well. And the next part that I wanted to focus on has to do with the Snowflake connectivity, and really this Snowflake, I think, was a very key aspect of the entire project, because it did provide a a state of the art database to be able to handle a lot of this application. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to hand this over to Joao. So I'm going to go out of my thing there, and if you want to go ahead and share, Joao, you can start up your part.
Yep. Tell me when you can see my screen.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, perfect. So for those who doesn't know, this is Snowflake. Basically, we have the environment here with our databases, our tables, and everything. We have an area here to use queries, and then we can create separate tabs here to make organizing things better. In this example here, I'm going to show you guys, I have a table where there are like a store, and there's a store with salesmen, customers, and orders. And then we want to calculate the commission for each one of the agents. Back in Alteryx, how can I connect to Snowflake? There are several ways to do that. One of them being data connections. For those that use Alteryx server, you can go to the Alteryx server admin page, go to data connections, and then by using a connection string, you can connect to your Alteryx, to your Snowflake environment. Here I created one to connect to our Snowflake, and I added myself. So when I go to Alteryx, I can just use a input data tool, click here, go to data connections, and connect to it. When I select that, I'll go over this window here. It's not loading. Let me load this again. So I go here, gallery. Some reason it's not matching here, but I'll see a window like this one where I can select the query, and then I can just type in what I want, or drag and drop stuff from a visual part of Alteryx that you can just select the table you want, see what you want there, and select the columns you need. The second way to do that is by using a system DSN. Basically, what you do here is go to your ODBC in your computer. Then you go to system or user DSN. I usually go to the system one, and then create a DSN connection here. Note that for this, you need the Snowflake driver installed, so do that beforehand. And then you can just go to add, select the driver you want, in this case, the Snowflake DSII, and then just type in the information here. The one I'm using right now is like this. So I have the DM Snowflake tests, and then the information here for what I need. I have the schema, the warehouse, and so on. The final type of connection is by using INDB tools and by using a file. You can also use INDB tools with system DSN, but I won't go over that. Here, what I did was create an INDBC file, which is just a text file here, which has a connection string attached to it. And then I can connect it to, Snowflake by using this. This approach is better when dealing with UNC paths. So for example, you have a company where a lot of people are going to connect to Snowflake and want to make sure that they're only using a single type of connection, not like everyone has a different setting. You can create this file, drop it in a UNC folder, and ask everyone to just use that exact same file. For INDBC files, you have a different path here, a different set of tools in Alteryx. So you have to connect, and then when you want the data to be brought out, you need a data string out. Otherwise, you just have to deal with the data using in the database tools. For the other tools, you just do it normal way. So here I got the agents, where I'm just adding the customer numbers for each one of the agents. And then the orders will show me at the amount of each agent has sold. Then I'm just joining the total orders here, calculating the commission, and then uploading the data. For uploading the data, I'm yet again using the file connection here, the data connection inside the gallery. And this data will drop the table in Snowflake, which right now doesn't exist. But when I run this, it will be created. So let me press run here. And as I'm using external browser authentication in Alteryx, several tabs will open up here. So I have to wait a little bit until they run. Let me check here. So something's not working on this one. Let me change this to another one. So let me use the ODBC connection here. Back to Alteryx. This is the window I just mentioned. So I can select the table here and what I want. As I had previously select the agents table, it's already here. So I just click on OK here. And then I'm going to run again. I'm just close this one, so I don't need it anymore. Okay. Oh, I forgot to change this one. It's also use that data connection. Let me also update it. And here I have to select the table name. So let me get that from Snowflake. I want it to go to this, but I want to write it in results. ODBC drop. Let me run this again. Okay, now it should work. Let me close the ones I don't need here anymore. And if you don't use external browser authentication, you won't be having those windows pop up every single time. Okay. Okay. Now, as you can see, it took 20 seconds to run this. And if I go back here to Snowflake and update here, I'll have my results table. And let's check the preview data here. Oh, forgot to select the warehouse. And then preview table. So here I have 12 rows, which show me the agents, the names, and then I can see their commission here. Or I can just, for now, this data is easy to read. I can just check it then in Alteryx, and then I can just, as Thales mentioned, I can sort them. And I can see that this one is the biggest, like he had the most gains from sales, and this one had the least. So that's basically how you do connections for Snowflake. And I usually recommend using this one. It's like the safest option using DBC tools, because you just select one, make that in a folder, and just try and avoid making people write in this, because otherwise someone can go there and change something and then everyone lose connection. So let people just have read access to this and it should work just fine. Also, by using InDB tools instead of just normal Alteryx tools, it's way faster, especially when using Snowflake. Back when we were developing, the client had like a 7 or 8 hour graph from Levastorm that could run in a few minutes just by using InDB tools in Alteryx. And I think that's it. Do you want to go back to your screen share, Robert?
Yes, thank you. I will take back over.
Let me stop mine here.
And I will get us started again here. So thank you, Joao. The real importance of those NDB tools being that when you can utilize the power of your relational database, instead of having to bring all the data down into Alteryx, you really can experience some gains, like Joao was saying, with the larger data sets. All right, let's continue on here. We have some success considerations in the project we're talking about here. There were some steps that really were valuable in the overall success of this project. lot of them is making sure that there are subject matter experts on hand. Even whenever you're trying to decipher from one tool to the next, even very experienced developers will have a learning curve. So having subject matter experts is very vital to cover that gap and allow developers to be able to make that migration into a tool like Alteryx quickly. We see some other things here. I think one of the big valuable things was having daily progress stand-ups. That way, any type of blocker, any type of misunderstanding or anything like that could be dealt with quickly, and everything can stay on track. We know how it can be hard to stay on track when you're dealing with a lot of unknowns, but these daily stand-ups were very helpful. And also having the QA handled by customer teams and in conjunction with the development teams is also, I think, one of the keys to success, because you want to keep both parties involved while you are updating the skill set of your in-house development and leveraging any consulting work, contracting work that you bring in, so you can get the best of both worlds, keep that business knowledge in-house, give your in-house developers the confidence that what they are doing is what the new Alteryx workflows are exactly what they need, and they can move forward with them as they had used the Lava Storm in the past. All right, just a couple of other things, just to be real quickly. And again, if you have questions, you can put those in the QA section. I want to make sure we have a couple of moments for that. Just real quickly, talk about Alteryx Analytics Hub and ClearStory. Now, these are two applications that are related to Alteryx themselves. Talis was one of the foremost experts in the Alteryx Analytics Hub, and we can see that it was a centralized platform for analytic assets. It had some of the ability to share and collaborate, as well as to schedule and run things on a server type environment. And the Alteryx began that going down that path, and then for business reasons, they chose to discontinue that. Well, there are several customers who had purchased AAH had to have things themselves made whole for that. They had to be able to migrate from a sunsetting application into usually a combination of server and connect, so that they could pull back those various elements. And Alteryx and Talis was really involved in getting those things done. Other thing is ClearStory. Now, ClearStory was another ETL type tool that Alteryx acquired ClearStory. Now, in a customer that we worked with, we had to work with them because ClearStory had a lot of holes in its development abilities, and because they were acquired by Alteryx, they needed a quick movement to Alteryx. But we didn't want to do just a one-for-one, feature for feature, because a lot of what this company was doing had still a lot of manual steps, a lot of redoing of work because of the shortcomings of ClearStory. But with Alteryx, we were able to smooth out a lot of those things, automate a lot of the tasks, use the internal reporting tools, pass those reports that were generated across their enterprise to their various factories across the country, and really be able to get the data into the hands of decision makers on a very quick basis. So ClearStory is another one of those things that it was a challenge, but we really had a good deal of success with that. And Alteryx, being with its modern connections and as Talis pointed out, very distinct usage of each of the tools. So because they're so specialized that way, you can create a lot of the processes you're looking for, even very complex processes, one step at a time through these tools. And since Alteryx integrates with Tableau and Excel, SQL Server, all types of environments, we were able to take advantage of those connections. All right, so in the time we have left, I see that we have some questions over here in the QA piece. So I'm going to open this up, and I see here there's a question about the cost for server Alteryx design license. And I know that we've got a strong sales team that would be able to give you some direct answers on that. I don't know, Talis, if you or Joel have anything to say directly about that.
Yeah, I just we're gonna send our sales email directly, because the costs they can actually vary depending on region, company, and number of users, the number of licenses. So it's hard for us to I
know you can get a generic number from, if you just go up on the internet and look and put in Alteryx pricing, you can get some generic things. But as Talis is saying, there are a lot of important considerations to make, like how many cores your servers have, etc., when you're making those questions. All right, cost of client Alteryx Designer. Again, for Designer, if you go up to that, if you look online for Designer prices, I think you'll be able to see that kind of information as well. All right. Any other questions that we can tell you about Lava Storm, Snowflake, or just the process of sunsetting these applications? I often struggle being patient to wait for questions, but we have a couple of minutes left here. So again, please feel free to put your questions in the QA thing, and you've got some expert Alteryx developers here who can be very helpful if you have anything live.
You just got a new one here.
Go ahead. You got a new one? All right.
Yeah. Was Alteryx used to migrate data into Snowflake continuously or just one time?
All right. So in this project that we talked about, Snowflake was used to pull data from Salesforce and so that we could keep historical data in Snowflake in large numbers, right? And Alteryx had ongoing connections to Snowflake so that every time the workflow was run, a connection was made to Snowflake, the data was pulled from Snowflake, and then the Tableau or SQL outputs were created from there. So yes, it was an ongoing connections to between Snowflake and Alteryx, and that's the importance of those that Joel was using.
Yeah, Robert, I was just gonna add, I think the question was more like, did we also use Alteryx to move that Salesforce data to Snowflake, right? So I think that question was more towards that. And I would say, like, in some instance, yes, but we also had a couple help of other tools to do that, because mostly because depending on the size of the data, it would be easier to do it with other tools and other processes that we had at that time. But I think Alteryx can also, and I can say, can relate for sure, that Alteryx can also be used to do that kind of thing, to move that data from Salesforce and load that into Snowflake tables.
All right, thank you, Talis, for getting that clarified. We want to make sure we're answering the questions that are being asked there. I think we're about out of time, but I wanted to thank everyone for their time, and please feel free to contact Data Meaning if you have any questions about these or other sunsetting applications. We have a wide breadth of experience here, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your days.